Hello, hello, everybody. How's everybody doing tonight? Welcome to episode 25 of Climbing the Ladder. I'm your host, ChanmanV, and joining me, as always, is the hairless wonder, John Clark from CSN. What's up, John?
I was fine until you called me the hairless wonder.
Look at his face. I was gonna pull that one on you and see what you look like, but Mark's gonna be joining us, and Mark Faraz from Quantic will be joining us a little bit later. He's running a little bit late, but we have a special guest on today. It's Chris Mitchell from Razer. What's up, Chris?
Hey, how are you doing?
Good, good. Chris is the global eSports manager for Razer, and he's responsible for all the sponsorships regarding eSports. So he is the man to talk to when it comes to Razer sponsoring any projects or teams or events and that sort of thing. So lots to talk about, Chris. Thanks for coming on the show today. And we haven't had a sponsor, I don't think, John, right? On the like a person representing a big sponsor in esports on the show yet.
I don't think we have.
Yeah, so this will be, lots of questions for you, Chris, and it'll be really great to get your perspective on a lot of things.
A pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Cool. So first up, I wanted to start out. Obviously we're going to be getting to a lot of sponsor talk and money talk and that sort of thing. But I kind of wanted to kick off things with talking about this player internship program initiative that you kind of launched. Maybe it was like 2 months ago, 3 months ago, or something like that.
About that, yeah.
Yeah, and when I first looked it over, I remember Drew sent me a link to it, and I looked over, and I felt like it was a really, really cool thing that you guys are doing. And why don't you talk about it a little bit with the viewers? And because I have a feeling almost nobody knows about it, so
right.
I kind of wanted to at least spend a little bit of time with you and have you, kind of let folks know what's going on, and particularly players that are watching this show, possibly. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, it pretty much goes a couple years back, really. I mean, we only started that a couple months back, but initially it started us. We have a couple of programs that already work for Razer. I myself used to play competitively. We have a guy that used to play World of Warcraft PvP competitively. Now, some people might say that's not an esports, but either case, we had a decent Quake player. Right now, HY from the team Zenith is doing his internship. So, and from our experience, and I think most people on the call or even at home will agree with that, is that pro gamers have a couple of skills or abilities, or usually develop a couple of skills and abilities that come quite in handy even in work life, whether they know it or not. So taking StarCraft 2 as a very good example is you learn how to multitask. You learn how to put in the hours and be disciplined about just working hard towards what you want to achieve. You have to read your opponents with little information and make a strategic decision based off that. These kind of things all come in handy when you actually work. So other than that, usually professional gamers have very high requirements for the gear. So that might come in handy if you look at product development. So there's generally a couple of soft skills before we go into like specific skills, whether that's engineering or marketing or anything like that. A couple of soft skills or characteristics that usually make a very good employee. People that are goal-driven, people that think strategically, can multitask, and are very passionate about what they do, right? Mm-hmm. So from our experience, pro gamers usually fall in two categories once we try them out in an internship. It's either they're absolutely phenomenal or they're absolutely useless. So there are people that don't have that, like they still want a game. They and game just 100% of their time. So those are the programmers that, while they're good to work with on a sponsoring level, they don't make good interns or employees for that matter. But those people that try to apply their skills and abilities and their knowledge of the industry within an actual job, that is not just gaming. These guys usually turn out to be very good employees. So it's not like this is a super altruistic charity kind of thing where we just try to give professional gamers an opportunity to learn about the industry. For us, obviously, it's also to find talented people that we can then hire and have them work for us to improve our human resources, I guess. It sounds very corporate,
right.
but at the end of the day, it's basically a talent searching tool in that sense, and at the same time, we're giving people a chance to see what working in the industry is like, because a lot of people don't necessarily know what work could look like in that industry. I mean, we're very close, obviously Razer, absolutely, with like our core philosophies are built on competitive gaming and on esports, and we've always been focusing on that. So we have a lot of very, very closely related jobs available, and having people that know what they're doing and they know games and they're passionate about games, finding these people to hire is basically the objective with this entire thing.
Yeah, so you said that it's specifically for professional gamers, right?
Right.
What qualifies them as a professional gamer?
So it's a bit of a gray area, I suppose, but the good thing is, basically, what we're looking at is people that competed at major competitions before. So and did decently well. People that are somewhat known for their gaming skill. They don't like it could even be in a small, like they are not all games are as popular, right? Okay, obviously we could look at StarCraft 2, at LOL, at Dota 2, where the top players are going to be famous. That's not necessarily the requirement. Like if I find someone who was like the world's best player in Bloodline Champions, that still shows that he was a very solid player and that he put in the hours, that he has certain skills and abilities, right? It's just about looking for those people that can excel at what they do within gaming, and yeah, so it's a bit of a gray area, but I would say looking at people that compete at major competitions within their respective game.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, it doesn't, it doesn't matter, I guess, whether they're a pro gamer or not. You're just looking for really good employees, right? And with talent, and that's pretty much what we've been saying here. And yeah, I think that's obviously the player pool is a good source for talented folks. And yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about it just because a lot of folks, particularly players, right? They kind of feel they kind of run into this huge decision, whether to kind of go full bore into esports, which means becoming a full-time player, right? That's really their only choice, or not, right? And I feel like this type of thing is an option that folks, players in particular, didn't have before, where they can get a job that's esports related and not be one of the best players in the world. They can just kind of basically transition into the business side of it, I guess. And that's really cool, having that option.
So one of the aspects in there as well is that while people like to become professional gamers, in other professional sports where you have to put in the hours that you have to put in, like in professional gaming, people can if they make it to the top, they can make a living off it and actually live off that money later on. Like if you're playing professional football or professional basketball, baseball, you name it, you can make enough money to actually live off that later on. Well, if you don't spend like a maniac. In gaming, right now there's a couple of gamers that can make a decent living of gaming, but once they're done with it, like they don't have much to show for, and like outside of the professional gaming career. So some people give up their academic career in that sense. Some people other companies that are not necessarily within that industry, they might have might not have that understanding of what competitive gaming is. They look at the CV and they see, well, for the last 4 years he hasn't been doing anything after school. He's just been gaming. It's going to make it very difficult for someone to find a job based on that outside of the industry at times. So for us, these are the people that we would like to work with us, actually. And so it's a win-win situation for both sides, I would think.
Yeah, it's a little bit like hiring your own type of thing, right? That's kind of
Pretty
cool.
much, yeah. And yeah, so basically, maybe just to give some background on that, we have that possibility in pretty much all of our offices. I don't know whether that's relevant here or not, but just gonna plug it because you asked
Yeah, I
about
mean,
it.
I think there are some players that watch the show, so it is
Right.
relevant. So
So for us, we have an office. We have 3 offices in the U.S. We have one in Texas, in Austin. We have one in Carlsbad, San Diego, California, and we have one in San Francisco. Then we have an office in Hamburg. We have one in Germany. We have one office in Singapore. We have one office in Taiwan, one office in Shanghai in China, and one office in Seoul in Korea. So pretty much all over the world. So it doesn't really matter what region you're from. And then technically we're offering internships in every possible department. So whether that's PR, marketing, product development is one that we're a lot of times looking at, obviously, because if you know your products and you know what's good, then product development is a decent option. But generally anything is open. And eSports, of course, community, all these departments have positions or internship opportunities open for people to see what things are like.
so these internships, I mean, do they pay anything, like even a little bit?
Yes, so it depends on the region in terms of pay. So, but they're all in some way paid for, like kind of regional and industry standard kind of thing. Like community doesn't want to pay for it.
Well, industry
No, so,
standard
they are paid for.
doesn't that mean volunteer sometimes?
Okay,
Yeah, that would be
maybe not.
industry standard.
Okay, let me rephrase that. Not industry, not esports industry standard, but
Okay.
maybe consumer electronics industry standard.
right, yeah.
Maybe we can. That might make more sense.
That's pretty good.
Okay,
That's
and
probably
where
more
do
money than
I
they'll
send-
ever make. What'd you say?
I said, where do I send my resume now? If they're
Oh
paying.
man, you can just drag it into the Skype chat. No, just kidding.
I'll do
Okay.
sponsorship. No, I mean, why not say it? If you submit your resume to sponsorships at Razerzone.com, that's where we're actually going through these. Ideally, include which department and which region, and then that's when we go through these. We're gonna be putting up a page on our site as well that gives a little bit of more information about this, and so people know what they should be like including in their application, because we got a lot of actually it's sponsorships with an S at the end.
Oh, sponsorships.
Sponsorships at Razerzone.com. A lot of applications that we've received were not really providing sufficient information, and like they don't even let us know what region, what department, or they don't even tell us like about the achievements or anything like that. So that makes it very difficult to judge whether someone qualifies for an internship or not. So that's why we're basically putting up an application form that exactly asks for all these things.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone knows what to include in the application. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, guys out there, again, if you're players out there, or players that might be interested in something like this, definitely send your applications to that email address, sponsors@razer.com, and see what other kind of jobs you can get in esports. And I mean, this sounds like a regular paying, this is more of a regular line job, which has absolutely all about, it has to do with all about esports, and I don't know. It sounds like a pretty great option, I think, for a lot of folks out there, getting paid something and learning, about the business side of esports and working for a great company like Razer. Sounds pretty good to me.
Are you looking, does it matter the amount of experience? I mean, for a lot of people, at least in the StarCraft 2 side of things, in North America, there are a lot of people that are fairly new to esports in general. Does it necessarily matter the amount of experience that somebody might have?
No, I wouldn't say that. Like at the end of the day, an internship, what we're trying to provide there is a learning experience for someone to really like. okay, a lot of people or a lot of other industries, and this is maybe more from my personal experience, when you do an internship, they make you do like irrelevant tasks a lot of times, like make you get coffee, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Right.
so that's, I mean, it's obviously not true for everyone and every company, but there's a lot of companies that do that. They bring in interns more like because they kind of like it looks good on them that they bring in interns, blah blah, or they make them do the work that they don't want to do. So that's something that at least when we're trying to avoid at all costs. So what we're trying to do is give meaningful projects across the internship duration, and work with them and get them involved in everything we do. Like really, like just now when we were working with HY, he was doing contract negotiations with 2 of our teams. So that's how involved we get them. Obviously not my most important teams, but at least the general process of how to negotiate a contract and a sponsorship agreement, he learned that. And then we looked at a marketing plan for our branded products. So like our team branded products, like we have a couple of team branded products with Counter Logic Gaming, with Team Liquid. We got a couple more coming up.
Right.
So he's basically working on a marketing plan that that for a product that we're going to be launching soon. So these are things where we're really trying to give them a good idea of what's to come, and at the same time, this is the only way we can really evaluate these people in these pro gamers in the work environment. Because if I make them get coffee all the time, I will never know whether he's good at an actual job. Right? So the only way for me to really find out whether someone would do a great job at what I want to hire him eventually for is by making him do all these things and see how he learns. And obviously at the beginning they're usually pretty bad, but that's not the main concern. As long as they improve and that's pretty much where it all comes down to, and that's how I circle back to your question, John, is initially you might not have a clue, but that's why you take up this learning opportunity, like not you specifically, but whoever, and then you learn from there, and you improve. And if there's a significant improvement over the course of the internship, then that's all we want to see. And that's like for us, that like if I see someone improving that significantly, then I would hire that person or try to hire that person. So yeah, experience doesn't matter all that much as long as he's shown some connection to professional gaming and have that passion about gaming as well.
Well, again, I think that's a great program, and hopefully, you guys will look into that. I put the link in there too, guys. So check out the link that kind of explains a little bit more of it. But let's transition over to obviously more of more sponsorship type of topics.
Right.
And I want to kick it off with kind of getting, I guess your thoughts and really having you answer the question of like what parameters do you use when you're talking to either a team or or an event organizer or a media person, maybe somebody like me who has a show. What things do you look at when you're trying to justify something like a gear sponsorship versus like a monetary sponsorship? Is it like only views, or views are the most obvious thing, right? Everybody always talks about, okay, the sponsors, they care about are views and impressions and that sort of thing. But what are other things that you take into account?
At the beginning, what we look at, definitely views. So that's websites, social media stats, these kind of things. Mm-hmm. Achievements of these guys themselves, of course, as well. But it's a lot of people have that misconception that it's just about winning. I think that's been discussed on your show as well before, where people, like a player gets a certain salary, beats another player that gets a higher salary and says, like, I should get more than that.
Right.
It's similar with teams, that an entire team says, hey, but our team has been performing better than this team. At the end of the day, and Victor from Team Liquid might hate me for it, but we started sponsoring Team Liquid when they weren't winning anything. Now they have the hero and Teja that bringing the victories, but actually In Control is a very good example. He's a valuable player to sponsor, but he doesn't win. Like I can't remember the last time he won a major competition, and yet I would consider him a very valuable player.
Yeah,
From
he
a sponsor
honestly might be the
perspective.
most valuable player on the EG's roster. Who knows?
So that's why I'm always trying to drive home that point that it's all about fan base and fan base engagement. That's ultimately what it all trickles down to. Because if you can have a fan base without winning, that's fine. Obviously, you need both. You need people with fan base and you need winners. Ideally, you have both in the same team or the same person, the same player. You need both because you want to win tournaments. You want to be on top. So Naniwa might be the opposite for a while. He's not the most cooperative or most fan base engaging person. I'm trying to put that nicely.
Yes.
But for a while he was winning a lot. Like for a while he was arguably the best foreigner. Right now, obviously Stefano has like shown a lot more, and even other players might are probably considered better than him at this point in time. But for a while, like when he was doing his runs at GSL, he was arguably one of the best StarCraft 2 players. Yet he might not provide that same value that someone who doesn't win as much does. So simply because it's at the end of the day for a sponsor, it's about getting your exposure and your fan base engagement. So it's one thing to get my logo on a player, but if everyone hates that player, and I'm not saying Naniwa is hated, but there might be players, or there were players before that we had to disengage from in that sense, simply because they weren't very well liked, and we wouldn't get anything out of the sponsorship in that sense. So at the end of the day, there's a limited budget that every sponsor has to work with. And my job or my team's job is at the end of the day to maximize the value we get out of that money we spend. And if I have two players that are both doing all right, but one engages with his fans in a much more authentic way and a much more engaging way, then I would go with that guy. And usually it's not like if someone withdraws a sponsorship, that doesn't mean that money is taken out of esports for us anyway. But it means it's routed to a different team or a different player that might be doing a better job.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get that, and I totally understand that. And my whole thing is that you talk about like players that engage better with their fans and that sort of thing. But for me, it's not enough. I mean, for me, like if I'm kind of thinking about putting my kind of sponsor hat on. If I was a sponsor, and I kind of just look at just the differences, and let's just say the teams right now, right? You have EG, right, who is obviously doing the best. I mean, they're getting the big big sponsor contracts. There's a reason for it, and when I just look at EG and I look at those players, the one thing I see is not only do they have not really healthy fan bases, right? A lot of other teams have healthy fan bases too, but my whole thing is that those guys like In Control Jeff, I mean, he sells Steel Series he sells the product. You know what I mean? He sells Monster Energy Drink. He sells Steel Series. He's still, and I don't see that with other teams. Like, I mean, I wish Mark was here because, like, the Quantic guys, you guys are all over their jerseys and stuff. But do I ever hear them say that, hey, like, I love my freaking Razer headset. Like, you should go get it, or anything like that. I never hear that. And so, like, do you guys even? I mean, do you value that more than just what I mean? Does that actually take into account or?
I'm actually constantly in discussion with our teams, pretty much all our teams, trying to drive home that point exactly. And this is not, again, this is even not just for our own case, but this will be super crucial once these teams want to engage non-endemic sponsors. For us, people are somewhat familiar with Razer, and we're getting a certain amount of value out of it by just sponsoring them. But it's far from what we would want to get or what we should be getting out of a sponsorship. When people because In Control being a good example, where players can drive your sponsors so much better, and with sponsors being the main money giver in this entire industry, it's something that within the teams and the players is something that has to be learned. Especially if you want to attract those non-endemic sponsors. Because if I'm okay, let's take something. I don't know if I'm a Mercedes, a BMW, or something like that. A Coca-Cola, maybe somewhat closer. Um, and I start sponsoring these guys, but I never see them like drinking my product on, like drinking Coca-Cola on stream, or bringing that to the events that they're playing and placing
Right.
that next to their equipment, and constantly like saying, "Hey guys, buy Coca-Cola because it's awesome." Um, I, as a sponsor from Coca-Cola, I probably say, well, they're not really doing anything to really push my brand, to push my product. So right now, what a lot of people fall into is this: at the end of every interview, you get a shout out, and I say like, "Thank you to all my sponsors, XMG, blah blah blah, Razer." Like you go through and you just rattle off a couple of sponsors.
Yeah.
That doesn't really like, and then they think they have done their job.
That's
Um,
yeah. That's
Which is a
exactly my point.
misconception at the end of the
So-
day.
Yeah, it's
So, Chris, would you guys? Is this something where you, when talking with players that you're sponsoring, do you have this conversation with them about ways that they can help
Yes.
promote and market Razer?
80% of the time I would be talking to team managers trying to drive home that point. A lot of times because often we have like a fairly large amount of teams. So talking to every player would be somewhat difficult. I talk to high-profile players a lot of times. Like I'm in constant discussions with Hotshot or Snoopy from CLG.
Right.
I constantly talk to the Team Liquid players usually. So there are players that I talk to, but at the end of the day, what I focus my attention on is the team managers, and for them, because at the end of the day, that's their job. As a good team manager, you teach your players how to promote your sponsor. Because as a team, it makes your job as a team manager a lot easier to then find new sponsors as well.
yeah, but are
Yeah,
they
Chris-
doing a good enough job? I mean, they're.
Yeah,
I mean, that's.
we've had that conversation.
It just. Oh god, it kind of drives me crazy because we have teams complaining that they're not getting enough money from sponsors, right? And I wish Mark was on here because I'd be arguing with him over this. And then you basically have teams arguing that they're not getting enough money from sponsorships, but you have teams that have players that aren't even pushing their sponsors. So it's like,
Right.
I mean, there's a reason again why EG is getting all that money is because those guys are selling product.
It goes to a point where people, when we like, they ask for a sponsorship. Okay, this hasn't happened in a long time, but it used to happen a lot more, where people ask for a sponsorship, and then we ask them, okay, so which products do you guys want to use? And they're like, yeah, I'm just going to use and they mention a couple of our products, and they mention a couple of our competitors' products, and I go like, yeah, if you're sponsored by us, I would. Like we need you to actually use all our products as well. So usually my first question whenever we talk to a team is, do you guys all want to use entirely Razer products? And then it didn't happen in the last 1.5 years or so, I would say. But before that, every now and then people were surprised that they would actually have to use our products if they're sponsored by us. And
Oh my god.
then
Wow.
then
Okay.
that goes to a point, like, I mean, okay, it's gotten better, as I said. Like, I haven't had that conversation in a long time anymore. But there's still this conversation where I go like, so how are you gonna how are you gonna promote our brand, our products? And they go like, yeah, you're gonna get a logo on my shirt and a logo on our website. And it's like, well, that's nice to have, but especially for a brand like us, where we have, I would say we're covered in terms of awareness or exposure, right? People know who Razer is. So I don't necessarily need to invest large amounts of money just to get the word about our brand out, hey, that we're actually there. Because what I really value at this point in time is people that can engage and can convince people and authentically. And this is a key point, that people believe in our products and can authentically tell other people, hey, this is a good product. And can tell people, hey, you should buy this because like I'm using it all the time and it's a great product. And you get that with a lot of teams. But they don't necessarily put their sponsors first, and they do it very, I would say, on a case-to-case basis, whenever they feel like it, rather than like actively trying to do so.
Well, I think, I mean, it's this, oh gosh, it's this, it's a little bit of a taboo, and it's a little bit of this perception, right, in the community, and I think in esports in general, that the players should only be focusing on playing, right? And if you look at all the other sports, all right, you know, this is how it kind of differs in the other sports, because the other sports have off seasons, right? And during the off seasons, all they're doing is like all the marketing stuff for all these sponsors and commercials and everything, right? Like they do all that during this off season, right? And unfortunately with esports, it feels like it's 365 days a year. But I mean, those players, you know, they sell Nike, they sell, you know, Gatorade and Coca-Cola. They, you know, they do all those commercials and everything. And I think in esports, like the players, they feel like they're, I don't know, selling out, or they're not, you know, being authentic, or I don't know what it is, you know, about trying to push, like, let's say, you know, your keyboards or something, like, you know, when they're streaming and just, you know, talking about it.
One thing that we always make sure is that all our players, like, we only ask them to promote our products if they actually believe in them, if they're actually comfortable using them as well.
Sure.
So, that's why, like, if someone, like, we send him a product and he's not super happy with it for whatever reason, then we'll tell him, okay, then don't promote it, don't talk about it, don't write a review about it. Like, just if you don't like it, that's fine. We'll look at a different product. So, for example, our Black Widow keyboards, we got the blue and the brown keys, right?
Right.
Initially, we only had the blue keys, and a couple of people didn't like blue keys. Simple as that. Team Liquid is one of those teams that they're entirely on brown Black Widows, and they love them. When we had the blue keyboards, we never got them to promote them or anything like that, because we knew they weren't comfortable with promoting them because they didn't like them. There are lots of other people that love the blue standard Black Widow keyboards.
Yes.
But the Team Liquid, they like, once we had the brown keyboards, they're like, wait, this is really good. Now with the tournament editions, like with all the macro keys on the left, they say, hey, this is the perfect keyboard. But until we got to the point where they had a product, and by the way, the tournament edition is largely, I don't know whether you guys are familiar with it, but
yes.
It's basically Black Widow without the macro keys on the left side, which is largely due to Team Liquid's feedback, because they said, okay, these macro keys on the left side, we don't need them. They sometimes get in the way for our standard hand placement. We would like to have that same keyboard, but without the macro keys. And so based on that, we actually developed that. Obviously, we did some more validation, got more pro gamers to validate that feedback, and eventually we had enough people and enough buy-in from professional gamers to make this happen. And I think we kind of got off topic on that one. But my main point being is we only ask players to really promote products once they're comfortable with them. And so that technically shouldn't be the concern. As in, like, people saying, yeah, I don't want to do this because I feel like a sellout or anything like that. Because they're not comfortable with it, they don't have to do it.
Yeah,
but,
I'm not saying the player should be disingenuous and like lie about whether they like a product or not, but I just don't think, you know, enough players talk about products that they do like right now, you know, just openly, right? Because I feel like there's a taboo. What's up, Mark?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. We're just talking about just, you know, really players promoting, you know, or kind of, you know, selling or promoting like sponsors' products. Right, and
we also mentioned we've talked about this before about how many teams or lack of teams that actually get their players to actually do some of that.
That's a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sorry for joining late, guys. I had a meeting that ran way over, but I mean,
okay.
if I repeat anything that you guys have already talked about, just beat me with a stick.
It's all good.
Yeah, that's actually, you know, in the dialogue that I had with the community this last weekend, it seemed like that was the big resonating sense of urgency that they provided, was simply that the teams don't do enough to promote their players and their brand. And like I said last week during the discussion with Jenna, you know, I think that the teams have like most teams have a very full plate, just fielding and logistical management of their competitive roster, just making sure that their players get on planes, get to events, and this kind of stuff. And that's when I said last week, the separation between, like, from a sponsor perspective of wanting to pay for those logistics. I think it's a matter of the sponsors are certainly happy to support that, but I think it's also that they expect a certain amount of marketing delivery on top of that is necessary to justify it from a value perspective. And I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on who you are and what kind of relationships you have. And the relationship that I have with Chris is a very good one. But I mean, I was very fortunate. He was my first sponsor, and he's been very good to me. But I mean, there's a lot of other sponsors that sponsor a lot of other teams that I've never been able to get a boo from. Does that make sense? And so I think it's just a factor that there's just not enough money in the scene in general. And when you have just an overall lack of funding, then teams have to spend the money that they're getting on flights instead of on marketing delivery. And so I think that's kind of where.
Well, I agree with marketing delivery, but I mean, you don't have to spend money for, like, let's just say Illusion to push Razer products on his stream, right? And I think, I mean, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong. Would sponsors pay more if there was a lot more of that, like per sponsorship?
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying. Like a guy like In Control. I mean, we're going back to that guy all the time, but
it's because he's a good example.
He is, and I mean, if I had the chance, I would have him under me. But my point being is that he's more valuable just because he does these things. So at the end of the day, I have additional sales to show for. That I previously might not have had. And while branding and exposure and these kind of things are always good to have, it's harder to measure and harder to quantify. And at the end of the day, being able to quantify the value that you get out of a sponsorship allows you to get more budget as well.
And I think that's exactly the difficulty that we've had. I mean, to a certain degree, we even had that difficulty. Me and Chris have talked about this many times. We're doing more and more and more, but it's one of those things where, what exactly, like, this has been the question I've always had. What can we do more that will result in us getting paid more? And it seems like that's a really unclear answer. I think that if the teams knew what they needed to do in order to, I think it was like, I don't know, man, like, we're letting the secret out of the bag here, like, okay, if you do this, then you can get more money. Because I think that's the bottom line. I think that if you look at it from the team's perspective, they just, because with all the events now, there's like 40 events. I mean, there's like DreamHack and IEM, and oh my God, it just goes on and on.
Mark, I'm gonna throw Chanman under the bus here. So before you came on, he said he used Quantic as an example that he doesn't, he sees Razer on your guys' stuff, but he doesn't see your players selling Razer.
It's true. I mean,
the same way that EG doesn't. That EG does it. So, your question, which is a really good question, do the teams want to know what more can they do to increase, their sponsorship? I would say, and not to bring up In Control again, he's kind of a big guy, literally, but he is an example of what to follow as far as his ability to engage, with people and sell it in an organic sort of way as well. It doesn't come off as pushy and salesman-like.
Cheap.
But I would say there's an issue here because he's very rare. We're talking about gamers here. We're talking about the stereotypical gamers. And the truth is most gamers are, especially in the StarCraft 2 community, are pretty introverted. Getting them to do those sorts of things that Jeff can do with the experience that he's had outside of esports is probably pretty difficult.
Yeah, but you can train somebody to do that. That's not a good.
Yeah,
that's not good enough to say that, man.
No, what I'm saying is teams should be able to train that, but we're using it. We're using somebody that's quite that has a lot of experience outside of esports.
I'm just going to be honest here. I mean, Chris, like, if Illusion was doing what Jeff was doing, right?
Yep.
Like, are you gonna pay more for that? I don't think so. I think what you're paying for with Jeff primarily is the reach. I think you're paying for his 48,000 Twitter followers. I think you're paying. I mean, yes, his delivery is amazing, right? But what I want to know is how much of the combination of value assessment for that particular,
That's a good
part of your
question.
portfolio is derived from the reach or is derived from the actual services delivery. Because, look, I mean, Illusion can be the best dude to sell ice to Eskimos in the world, but if he's only got 700 people on stream, he's not going to compete with a guy who's got 5,000.
Yeah. No, I think I mentioned it a couple of weeks back in Valencia. It's this threefold of things that every team has to take care of. One is the player marketing or personality marketing. One is the team marketing. And the third is the sponsor marketing. And only if you look at all three put together is how you can actually evaluate the team.
But here's my point. My point is, though, Chris, is that the investment, like if you're like an EG, right, and you can get all these really big personalities that are already like pre-sales oriented and they already have massive fan bases and you can pay them $5,000 a month each, then you're golden. But like, let's suppose I had $1 million and let's suppose I went out there and I bought all these high flagged players.
Right.
Like, do you think I could go and demand, $120,000 a year sponsorship from XYZ company? I wouldn't get it. Like, how long would I have to power that? Well, I mean, to a certain degree, I know the answer to this question because I'm doing it. Al, I mean, like the investors come in, the private equity comes in, and they build something because that's their understanding of what they think the scene views or sponsors view as valuable. Like we built our house. It was a very big, monumental, expensive endeavor, right? You would think that people would be very interested in engaging on that particular property, but at the same time, you're like, well, but show me what you're doing with that property. Well, but the problem is that what we're doing with that property isn't very much right now because we don't have any money coming in for that property, and there's nothing that nobody's asking for anything in regards to that property. And so the money that's coming in is going to put players on planes. So it's kind of like a catch-22. You're always in this like catch-22. And I think the thing that I'm learning from this whole discussion, or like over the last week, is that we need like at least half of our budget needs to be for these actual marketing activities and promotion activities. And that means that we can support a lot less players than I think that we originally had thought that we could, because everything costs twice as much as you thought it was going to, no matter what it is. I don't care if it's sending 2 guys to Korea. We're like 2 or 3x budget on sending 2 dudes to Korea to train. I mean, it's ridiculous. International flights are crazy.
It's, I mean, go ahead,
Okay.
Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
Go ahead. Okay. It might be the case. I mean, teams a lot of times look mostly at their costs rather than at the value created at this point in time, which might be the main problem within esports at this point in time. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how high your costs are if you don't deliver value. And I'm not talking about Quantic here. I'm talking in general about teams.
Oh, absolutely. Right.
You can have super high costs and people go like, yeah, but look at this. We have to spend this and this amount of money to even keep these players or to send them to certain events or anything like that. Ultimately, if you have no costs and you provide a lot of value, I'm still going to give you money. And if you have high costs and provide no value, I'm not going to give you any money. And so there's this misconception of looking at costs to justify sponsorship proposals that are sent to me, which I don't want to know what your costs are. I mean, it's good to know. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's good to know and it's interesting. But at the end of the day, what I have to look at is what can you do
value-wise
for my brand? Because ultimately, I have my pile of money that I can throw at teams in whichever way. And I'm going to throw it at that guy that can promote my products the most efficient way, is most authentic. And this is nothing to do with being greedy or anything like that. It's a rational decision. If you have 2 players that are doing well, but one can push your product, you take the guy that can push the products. It's as simple as that. And so at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your costs are. It matters what value proposition you can provide. And right now, there might be still a misconception, or there might be more money spent than value generated. And this is also, that's why it's so super crucial to get non-endemic sponsors into esports, because you have the reach, you have the audience. Looking at
it's the
Riot
quality
finals,
of reach, though, isn't it, Chris? It's
It
more
doesn't.
about the
No,
quality of reach.
No, that's what he's saying. That's exactly what I was saying, John. I don't
There's
think
two-
it is about the quality of the reach. I think you could have Hawk be the biggest baller, Razer pimper in the world, but when there's like 17 people watching him, who cares? It doesn't matter.
no.
No,
So
but I mean,
No, but it's the
seven
qua-
people
yeah,
is a very
yeah.
low number. Nobody's going to sponsor that. But let's take a comparison of somebody who's got, 20,000 Twitter followers and somebody who's got 15,000. That's still 5,000 people difference. But the guy that's
Right.
got 15,000 Twitter followers has a much better, he offers a much better value because of his ability to sell that product and to the 15,000 people that he has, as opposed to the guy that's got 20,000 just sits there like a bump on a log and doesn't do jack shit.
Right.
So
There's a combination of
I'm-
both. You need these guys to be more well-rounded and doing like
Yeah.
those popular players
I
doing
mean, I'm sure
that,
there's no
and-
magic formula. There's definitely probably no magic formula. I'm sure Chris doesn't
So,
sit.
I mean,
at
here's the thing, though.
his-
Here's
at
the
his
thing,
desk,
though.
like calculate numbers all day. I mean, it's got to be about something looking at something as a whole. I would assume, and I'm not in his position, but
No, so maybe one thing that is always a good measure for team strength is, for example, when we do team branded peripherals with them. Because a Team Liquid mouse mat, it was sold out. The first 2 batches were sold out within 24 hours. So the entire quantities that were produced were gone within 24 hours because people just bought them, bam. It was gone in no time. So that, like, we're trying that out.
Yeah,
to
but see, that's
really-
not really a team
That's different.
sponsorship.
Yeah, that's
not
different.
a team sponsor. That is a, like, look, Liquid and
They,
CLG.
they have a they have a community side behind
Yes.
it.
Absolutely,
sure.
man. If it was
Website.
GameSpot, it would be the same
It's a
thing. You'd
website,
sell it.
yeah.
If you made a GameSpot mousepad, you'd sell them out right away too.
Right, but a good team. Okay, so I know some numbers from EG. I know some numbers from Navi. They know how to sell products as well, and they don't have a community. They don't have a community side. Okay, so Team Liquid might be a bad example. I don't know why CLG doesn't really have a community
So let me
side.
let me
So
let me come-
CLG would still be okay, but EG and Navi do decent numbers.
So here's the thing, though.
so-
EG pays their players twice as much as everybody else does, and
Right.
like the players already don't want to do this marketing shit. So like to tell the players that you have to do this marketing shit, and then they're like, you're not. They're like, well, you're not paying me enough, and all this kind of like those are the kinds of conversations that I think that the smaller teams have. And I'm not saying that we have those conversations as much now, but I know that we did when we were younger. We sure did. And then
Right.
on top of that, everybody criticizes EG for making their players do all this marketing shit because their skill suffers. So there's like a constant like push and pull that's going on here. And I think that's why when I talk to Alex is like, well, you have some players to build your franchise band, you have some players to win,
Right.
you have some players to be engagement oriented with the community. But in order to do that, you have to be able to hire all those players and you have to pay them good money. Like, I mean, when you're getting paid what EG's paying, I mean, you'll do anything, right? I mean, whatever you ask.
Yeah,
me to
but
do.
Well, let's
you don't have. There's 2 things to that. The players have to be the players have to change that mindset, because if you want to be a professional gamer at the end of the day,
right. Exactly.
where's that money supposed to come from?
Exactly.
It comes from sponsors.
It's gotta
So
feed.
people don't pay, like companies don't pay money for just having someone play. It's not a charity at the end. It's a sponsorship for a reason, not a charity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing. The other thing is, like obviously you won't be there overnight at a level where maybe EG might be or other teams, but you go there step by step and you build your platform based on that, or your team.
I completely agree. And I think it's all about demonstrating the right behaviors early, even if you may not have the reach, so that sponsors like you can see what you saw in us and invest in us and say, hey, look, I think this is going to work really well, and I want to get behind these guys from the beginning and build a good long-term working relationship. And, I think that's what we've done. So, I mean, I think it does happen, but I mean, it doesn't happen a lot, is what I'm saying. People are generally looking for what's already out there, that's already a good deal, what's already, proven, I guess. And if you're like supporting 2 or 3 titles, and then you're going up against people who are supporting 6, and there's all this kind of cross demo stuff there, and they have big, it's not. I mean, I'm not saying even EG in particular. I'm just saying that every team has a different offering, a different flavor, a different type of reach.
Yeah. So okay, Chris.
I was going to say. So, I mean, I had a question for you, Chris, because
Yes.
you definitely were talking about, you think that esports needs more endemic sponsors, right? I think everybody in esports agrees.
Non-endemic, yeah.
Non-endemic, and everybody
Yes.
agrees with you, right? And so, I'm wondering, what does that mean for Razer though? Like, let's just say like the Coca-Colas and the Gatorades and the giant, and these giant sponsors come into esports. How does that? I mean, if anything, I would say they kind of knock you out as being like kind of the top sponsor in this esports
The
industry.
the endemic partners would lose power, basically.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm surprised you would. I mean, I'm glad you say that, but I'm a little surprised that you would say that.
Well, I think it's because the load's too high on Razer right now. The load's too high on these endemic sponsors. They don't make $50 billion a year. They only do a few million, or whatever.
Okay, so for the way I see it is, it's something that needs to happen for esports to really become professional. Whether this is something that's good for Razer or not, it might be even a separate issue, but I would still argue that it ultimately is in the long-term perspective. First of all, these are complementary sponsors. So if a Coca-Cola sponsors one of my teams, it doesn't necessarily take away from me. I might have a smaller logo on the team, or something like that, but generally the team is able to do so much more. Like, I don't have to pay for flight tickets to events. I don't have, like, it lessens the burden on me, and at the same time it allows I mean, okay, the more sponsors you have, automatically the more professional. This is maybe a chicken and egg situation, but the more professional players get, the easier it is to get non-endemic sponsors, and the more professional sponsors there are, the more pressure there is to be more professional at the same time. So what we're doing on our part, is like what we're trying to do is get non-endemic sponsors to be involved in esports. So partners that we work with that might not be necessarily within esports, we're trying to get them into esports. And the other thing is that we try to show our teams, or like teach our teams, how to promote sponsors, not necessarily only just to promote us, but also to be able to promote and act professionally towards sponsors that are not familiar with the esports scene. Like, if I work with unprofessional teams, I can do that. I'm familiar with the scene. My expectations are maybe not the highest. I know what I'm getting in when I talk to some of these teams. If I'm the sponsorship manager for Coca-Cola, I don't expect to be talking to a 15-year-old kid that tells me that I can get a logo and that's it, and then they forget to send in reports, and they don't know how to do invoices and stuff like that. These things, I mean, some teams don't know how to do an invoice. They have a financial sponsorship, and they don't know how to invoice us. Other teams...
It's frustrating for you too, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, of
The
course.
lack of team leadership.
Right, but I know I have to expect that to a certain extent. The only thing I can do is to fight it with like as much as possible. So with every of our team, a lot of times I have discussions, kind of scolding them in terms of what they should be doing better. And this is not so much because I have a huge problem with it. While it's annoying to me, it's not the end of the world. But it prevents them from ever getting a non-endemic sponsor. People that you still have to convince that gaming is a possible venue. And that's why I circle back to what I said earlier. It's like the reach is there. If you look at the international, if you look at the Riot Season 2 championships, they got 5,600,000 concurrent viewers. There's a huge reach that is larger than most competitive sports that have sponsors. But there's still that link missing of that professional behavior to a large extent that has to happen until these non-endemic sponsors can really be brought into esports. And there's two things to that. You might get lucky and get a non-endemic sponsor to bring in money into esports. That's one thing. But delivering the value and keeping
even harder.
them within that industry, you have to know what you're doing, and a lot of people don't at this point in time. So that's a huge problem. That's what we're trying to get across to our teams. Well, as I said, like for us, obviously, I also benefit from it if the teams finally know how to promote sponsors. But at the same time, they also get non-endemic sponsors, which then lessens the burden on us. And most of these, like the non-endemic sponsors, are by rule complementary to what we're doing. Right now, it's the computer peripherals, the computer hardware companies that are the largest money givers within this industry. And while Nike and Adidas in basketball or soccer or so are some of the largest, they're by far, like, there are credit card companies, there are alcoholic beverage companies that give a huge amount of money to these industries, which only allows them to be at that level that they are at. And we're kidding ourselves if we think esports can do without these non-endemic sponsors. It's a requirement, but right now, like, and that's why Twitch and Owned. Okay, I'm going like all the way now, but Twitch and Owned are super important in the development of esports right now, because they're bringing in non-endemic sponsors in a platform that they are familiar with, that they can control, which is basically media buys or TV spots or ads. These traditional, like, non-endemic companies, like whether that's a P&G or someone else, like I've seen P&G ads on Twitch before, which is also with the help of CBSI, of course. But at least these companies get a first glimpse of, hey, gaming is a possible platform. Maybe not on a sponsorship level yet, but at least they see it as a media buy platform, which will be the first step to actually get them into sponsorships as well in the long run. So what Twitch and Owned are doing is probably one of the most important things to bring esports forward to that next level that esports needs to come to.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that they're playing a very pivotal role. I think that, especially since we're using their platforms as exposure points to deliver value to partners like yourself. I also want to just point out, talking about catch-22s, that I think is difficult when you're a newer team starting out. And I can say this because I'm kind of like the newest big team. We started this with our own money, of course, right? It's funny because when we kind of got into this, Scoots was like, well, we don't do this with our money. We do this with partner money. And I was like, really? Like, I guess I just had thought that people, just power this stuff on their own. But so anyhow, we got into this, and we put a lot of our own money into this to make the thing happen. But here's the thing: when you don't have sponsors as a team and you're funding it yourself, there isn't an impetus upon you to do or learn the marketing stuff. Does that make sense? Then when you get the sponsors, when you start to get new sponsors, you get one or two new sponsors, right? All of a sudden, like, you need to start doing this marketing stuff, but your focus has always been on managing the team. And I guess it's kind of where we were last week. I think in traditional sports, the marketing stuff and the management of the team are done by two separate companies.
Yep.
There's a marketing company that does the marketing stuff for the team and for the league, and the team is just a team. They try to win, and they try to get the best players they can.
Well, I kind of brought up a point a little bit earlier, Mark, before you got on, is that, with the traditional sports, is that they have an off-season, right? They have an off-season where those marketing teams work with those teams and those players, and they do commercials, they do charity, like appearances, and they do all that stuff, right? But with esports, it's 365 days a year. So unfortunately, we don't have those kind of gaps, I guess, that makes it obvious when the players can, I guess, switch hats.
Yeah, I think that's another really good valid point. I think that the players on smaller teams have also never been placed in a situation where they're demanded of them this marketing stuff. Because as a player, right, like all of a sudden you're Suppy and you're on Check 6, right? And sure, Check 6 is doing the best it can to market the best it can, but it has a limited reach, right, in comparison to EG, and limited resources to pay its players and everything else. And then all of a sudden you get picked up by an EG. Well, now all of a sudden there's all these marketing expectations on you, right? And I guess it's kind of like growing up as a player. And even having Naniwa, I can say this as well. I mean, I don't think that Naniwa would have ever had any personal sponsorships had it not been, coming through our way for a period of time, and where we worked with Naniwa over and over and over again to explain, like how important fan engagement is and how important it is that he uses his Twitter and what he can do with it. I mean, this is a guy who, when I picked Naniwa, literally, he had 17,000 Twitter followers and 65 tweets.
Yeah, and
No joke.
yeah, that's what we were talking about. Like, it's not only reach isn't the only thing you can have, right? You have to be able to execute with that reach.
Exactly, and you have to have the behavioral habits built into executing with that reach. Like, we're just now getting to the point as a company where we're like, okay, we need players to do this, and we need them to do this, and if they don't want, like, we're here to build the entire player, their brand, their skill, their exposure. And if they're not interested in building their brand or their exposure, and they're just interested in their skill, then we don't need that. Like, we might be able to use that with 1 or 2 players, but we don't need a whole roster full of players that's like that. So now we have lesser known players that we're trying to do more marketing stuff with. But the problem is that, of course, because they're lesser known players, nobody cares. And so then that's a situation where kind of like the sponsors have to kind of take a risk on you and give you activation budget to try to activate with these lesser known players because they're somewhat known, like State, for example, right, or Hawk. They have fans. But I mean, like, we found the other day, like, some dude on Team Liquid named himself Quantic Hawk. He's got 19,000 Team Liquid posts since 2007. We don't know who the hell this guy is. We're going to offer him a Razer mousepad signed by a Hawk in exchange for his account name. I mean, people know who these dudes are. I mean, Hawk tied 1-1 with Fantasy last night. But the thing is that the direct engagement with Hawk isn't there. His social properties aren't developed. So his fan following isn't seeing him on a daily basis like they are in Control, for example. And I guess to a certain point, once you have like a bunch of players that you fan follow all the time and you're engaging with all the time, it becomes increasingly difficult for up-and-coming players to really get that interaction going, right? Unless they're extremely consistent and extremely regular. Like, they have to stream every day. They have to do these things. They have to have the right behaviors and the right routines, I guess.
Yeah, they do. They do. I mean, absolutely. And sometimes it's just lucky. You know, you just some event or something just happens right, and it just explodes one day for them, right?
Yeah, like I literally have people on my team, right, who say meow 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 Maximus Black, right? Because Maximus Black's not really a player; he's a media guy. Da 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 da. I tell them, I said, dudes, you know what? Maximus Black's fan following is bigger than the whole rest of this team combined. Maximus Black works his ass off every single day. Whenever I talk to that dude, he's like, hey man, you know what? I don't have time to screw around with this shit. I need to go. I need to go because I got people waiting for me, and I'm supposed to be streaming for 6 hours, and then I got 2 shoots I need to do, and I got an audio voiceover I got to do, and da 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 da. Like, the dude is working every day. So
and Jeff Maximus Black pushes product too.
He pushes product. He's always thinking about how to grow his following. He's always thinking about how to serve his fans genuinely and how to promote brands. And I think that that's exactly the kind of behaviors that we need in esports. And people make fun of Maximus Black. But why are you making fun of this dude? He's the one doing the right shit. I mean, maybe he's not God's gift to super ultra grandmaster, Korean Protoss, but I mean, the dude has all the right behaviors. Even in spite of that, look, he did it, right? And that's the whole thing. So I mean, I feel like I need to have Jeff come and teach the rest of the players some of what he knows instead of the other way.
Do that.
Instead of the
Absolutely,
other way around.
dude. You know what? I have actually been thinking about that for like the last couple weeks, Mark. I just been forgetting to mention that to you. You should freaking have Jeff come to the house and tutor all these guys. I mean, seriously, and on at least some techniques to do that, because, like, you're right that it's hard, obviously, for folks that these players that don't have any reach and that kind of sort of thing. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be prepared for that day that it does explode on them. You know what I mean?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, basically, like, I tell our players, like, I'm at the point now where I tell our players, look, if you just want to play StarCraft, like, that's not what we're paying you for. We're paying you for everything else that makes you a legitimate pro gamer.
Right.
And if you have to be willing to take time out of your day every day to do those tasks, and it's not a lot. We don't ask a lot. Maybe take an hour or 2 hours of your day to do fan-related, engagement-related stuff and start to build those habits. But it's rough. It's really rough because you know what? Top StarCraft players are divas, bro. They're divas. Like, they want to play their game and they want to be the best they can, and all they can visualize in their mind is winning. They can't visualize doing a bunch of shit that they don't like. But I try to tell them, I say, hey, look, there's a whole bunch of dudes who are powering this company with their own money that they go to work every day to earn doing shit that they don't like so that you have this opportunity. It's time for you to, like, do some of the things that you don't like so that we can, make our sponsors happy and make everybody become more attractive.
Well,
no, we have
I
this.
have a question. I have a question for Chris Mitchell, real quick. Chris, based on what Mark has been saying, I hope you didn't think we forgot about you.
No.
What is there? If you could just say, based a little bit on what Mark said and what we've talked about, if there was one thing that you would like to see more from the players, in terms of their ability to market your product better, is there one thing that you could say, you know what, this is one thing that a lot of people could improve on? If you can't think of one, that's fine. But I'm wondering if there's just one thing that you consistently see over and over again. Like, maybe it's just laziness. Maybe the one thing is they just get off their asses and do something. I don't know.
So maybe streams is a very easy. I don't know if it's the worst example, but it's one example. A lot of people have a fairly decent amount of followers or viewers on their streams, which is basically the easiest platform to show what products you're using. A lot of people don't. Like Team does to a certain extent, for example. A lot of people don't even know what products they're using, which would be very, very easy to do if you buy a webcam for $10, $20 or so. Place it on your keyboard and mouse, and just show what products you're using at any given point in time. That's the easiest thing to do. It costs you $20 per player to set up the webcam, and you're good to go. Like it's automatically promoting your product. Then it wouldn't so this doesn't even take time out of your practice schedule, and you're already promoting product. You're doing something for your sponsor. Obviously, that's easy with Razer because our products are very visible. As opposed to if you're sponsored by Intel, it's going to be difficult to show that you're using an Intel CPU. But for Razer, that should be fairly easy. And on the stream itself, how difficult is it to say which product you're using at any given point in time? Like you're on the stream, you're playing, after a game you say, hey, no, I just won this match with my Razer Death. I mean, it has to be not like it's just easy plug, because obviously that sounds like you just have to do it. But my point being is, get in a conversation with your followers and talk about what you're doing, what products you're using, and why you're using them. But yeah, the webcam is probably the easiest example, because it doesn't even take anything away from you as a player. You don't even need to articulate yourself. As in, some people say, but my English is not very good, or I'm not confident in speaking on camera or anything like that. Then just put a webcam on your products. That provides a lot of value, and yet a lot of people don't do that.
Look what it did for Violet. That's exactly how it helped build Violet here in North America. People just started tuning in and watching him. At that point, he had very little English.
I mean, look at Violet. I mean, Violet's a great example. That guy talks about Razer. I remember countless times he talked about Razer, talked about him loving his mouse or loving his keyboard, and I mean the guy barely even spoke English.
Violet's a really good.
Coached well.
He's a really good case that he was coached well. I mean, you have to look at Andrew. Only had one Violet to deal with right then, right?
True.
We have 20, right?
True.
And then that goes back to Jenna's question. Well, if you had to do it all over again, and you could start all over again, and you could do it with just one or two players, and then do it right and everything else, and I said no, because that would totally screw me because of the exposure factor. There's a certain amount, you have to have exposure, right? Because like Chris said, if you don't have exposure, then you're not relevant. So
on that note, to be fair, Violet right now is worth more than 85% of any other Koreans, and even if I have a team of 5 Koreans, take aside MC, MVP, maybe DRG, wow, they all have but yeah, take away a couple of these really high-profile players. I would pay more for Violet alone than I would pay for 5 other Koreans. Because he can provide so much more value. He's super credible. He knows how to work with press. He went out of his way to learn English. All these kind of things. Violet is more valuable than having 5 Koreans be sent over to events and do well and win. But even if Violet doesn't win, because his fans love him, he's credible in his sponsor marketing marketing. So focusing on this one player at least paid off for him, I would think. And you see Azu picking him up and investing quite a bit of money on making sure he's well taken care of, simply because he provides that much value.
And I think that's basically where we are as an industry. That's what you just said, Chris. That's where we are as an industry. Like like newsflash to everybody. We started playing video games. Then we played video games competitively. Then we got very, very serious about playing video games competitively and about winning, and the excitement of winning, and the nostalgia of winning, and what that means to the fans. But now, right now, where we're at, is doing the shit that EG does well is more important than winning. And if you don't do that shit, then you don't get the money to even show up to the event to have a chance to win in the first place.
Mr.
No
Bitter would
monies, no
disagree with
monies.
that.
No, well,
I wouldn't entirely agree with that. What EG does is important, but it's equally important as winning. Like, you can't have a fan base if you lose all the time. Well, it's very, very difficult.
Well, I mean, obviously.
Okay, Ink might pull it off. But you have this one guy out of I don't know how many gamers. If you don't ever win, people are not going to look up to you. There's a lot of players
Max is flexing
that
in
do
the chat
very
right
well
now,
on a marketing.
Jeff's going, hey man, I don't win all the time. I'm fine.
Yeah. Okay. He provides a certain amount of value, but he would be 10 times more valuable if he would win.
Sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I think a lot to do with the whole winning thing, and I, John, I was right there with Mr. Bitter too, and it's funny because my frame of thinking about this has been slowly changing over time, and I used to be the guy that was like they have to win, if they win, then all of a sudden this industry becomes great, and hopefully that winner is like Michael Jordan, like somebody who's marketable too. But I think when you're measuring what's easier, I mean they're both really difficult to do. Becoming marketable and becoming becoming like the best player in the world.
I'm sorry. Maximus Black just said, Razer, when you gonna make me a mouse pad?
oh, actually, man. Okay. That's a good idea. That is a good idea. But anyways, getting back to my point, I think there's the player culture just needs to change. Like,
I think you're right, Chris. That's exactly.
Yeah, players need to know they need to help themselves by doing this.
Yeah.
It's not about winning.
Top players are extremely competitive. You're asking them to sacrifice time to be marketable, which is exactly the opposite of what players are trying to do in the first place, be the top in their game. And I think this goes back to roles like Alex was saying, like, hey, you may have one player, his job is to win. Like in our case, like from a relatable perspective, right? Like the STC is such a good player, right? And he's a Korean player, and like he's our guy to perform, But we have to have other players that are doing a lot more fan engagement, But it's tough to find those players who can still be relevant, because if they're not able to make main stage or mainstream, you have to be as good as Jeff is in order to be relevant. Does that make sense? Like Jeff's mainstream is every day for 6 hours, but some of these,
There are people like an MC or a Violet that can compete on the highest level and engage with their fan base. So it's possible. Maybe the players have to be more talented. But ultimately, my point is, the players don't necessarily have to do all that themselves. That's where the team management, the coaches come in. A lot of these things can be facilitated by team managers. If I'm a player, I play games all day long, right? And then when I finish my practice schedule, I turn around and give a 10-minute interview with the guy that already prepared the question. I just answer them before I go to bed. That doesn't take away much of my time of the day, and I can definitely have it within my schedule. So it's just having even showing up for a photo shoot for 2 hours. You don't need to do that every day. You do that like once every year or so, so your sponsors have good photography of you with their products that they can use in whatever promotional materials they want to run. So again, like, it's not that much that's required. You don't even need to take up much time out of your day, and a lot of it can be facilitated by team managers, team coaches, whatever it is. So we obviously want the pro gamers to compete at the highest level and don't be distracted too much from that. And that's where the team comes in to facilitate that, I would think.
Yeah, I think that you're right, and I think that is the challenge of the team that's growing up. Like that's basically, Like it's
Right.
when you stop powering this with your own money, if you want to get partners to pay for this stuff, you basically need to stop running it like a charity and start running it like a business. And you need to expect things from players. You need to tell players, hey, look, put out or get out. Like, you might be the best damn StarCraft player in the world, but if we can't get your help to fund this team, then you can't be on it. And that's a rough line, folks. The community doesn't want to hear that line.
No, but the community. I mean, we also don't want to admit that we're not at a point yet. And again, it's my mantra every week: is that esports doesn't have the structure in place to be self-sufficient in the fact that that the players don't have to work so hard to market themselves and to market the sponsors to support the teams. We don't even have anything in place where revenue is just coming in other ways. I mean, we rely on the sponsors, and as long as we rely on the sponsors, it should absolutely be known that the players on the team that are getting sponsored by the sponsor are going to be required or should be required to help support that sponsor, because without that sponsor, you're done. I mean, we've said this before. I mean, almost every team and almost every league is one sponsor away from not being alive.
Yeah,
if one major sponsor dropped out, they'd be dead.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit too. And there's one topic that I've had here that was basically, I know Mark, you wanted to talk about it a bit, or actually no, Chris, you wanted to talk about it. It's what do sponsors pay for exactly whenever they're sponsoring teams? And you mentioned a little bit, Chris, earlier about if we got non-endemic sponsors, they'd come in, they'd help out with paying for flights and that sort of thing. I think most of the community, when they think of these sponsorships, I think they envision just, Chris, you just writing a check to Quantic and just handing it to them like every month. Talk to us a little bit more about the details as to like what exactly, is it actually split up into the budget? Okay, we're covering just the airfare and the housing for this player when he goes to all the tournaments, and then we're in X, Y, and Z.
Right. So we have basically 3 levels of sponsorships. One is a cash sponsorship, one is a product sponsorship with travel support, and one is just a product sponsorship. Okay. And depending on which sponsorship we're looking at and the amount of it, there are different deliverables set out in terms of what teams have to deliver. There might be so on the very base level, they obviously have like even just product sponsorships. They do the standard stuff like logo placement, sending in. So one thing that a lot of teams are surprised about is that you need a monthly report about their activities. And
yeah, we don't have any problems with that.
Obviously no. I mean, if a cash teams wouldn't get their money as soon as the monthly report is in. So that makes it very easy. With product teams, it's a bit more difficult because you give them the price at the beginning, and then you basically don't have any leverage over them anymore outside of the contract, which ultimately is, not necessarily enough to push a team to do certain things. But so teams are surprised that they have to fill in a monthly report for the duration of the sponsorship about what they've been doing, about their website, the social media, these kind of things. Without that, how am I going to justify spending money on them? I can't, right? Mm-hmm. So I have to be able. I don't like. Okay, obviously I have a general idea of how teams have been performing, but if I want to look at the 50+ teams that we're sponsoring, I would like to have a proper overview of which teams are my best teams in terms of, if I want to promote something on social media, which are the top 10 teams that I should work with on promoting certain things? If I want to do something on streaming, which are the teams that have the highest streaming numbers? And I don't want to then go out and figure out every single time, obviously I know SoloMid has one of the highest streaming numbers in the world, but and above, I might have to go down to who else does decent streaming numbers? And so just having a report, for example, is very important. So maybe to go into what we're looking at in the report itself, because those are the things that determine the value of a product. We start off with of a team. So we start off with web sets and social media sets. We look at achievements in terms of tournaments, how well did they do in competitions, anything like that. We look at, have they done any work press and if they've done so, have they managed to get in a sponsor mention, or did they manage to get our like logo into the interview, or I don't know what, in the collaterals. So this might be interviews, this might be AMAs, I don't know. It could be anything really, and then you obviously you have to distinguish between online press and basically really strong teams manage to get their own players in magazines. Like, I mean, I remember SK Gaming a couple of years back where the FIFA twins, Hero and Style, I don't know whether you guys are familiar with them, but they were in Playboy in Germany. In Playboy. Obviously not naked, thankfully, but...
Did they have a Razer mount in their hand or something?
No, we weren't. Razer wasn't involved with them back then. I know them personally, so I'm friends with them, and I followed that. But getting your players into a mainstream media like that obviously is a huge value created. And it's not just value for the sponsor, it's value created for the team itself. So it's not like every time you do something marketing related, you're doing it just for the sponsor. You're building your brand as a team. Like the SK Gaming, the Fnatic, the EG, the Navi, the Mousesports, whatever it is, these are big names because they've been around for so long, and they have a certain value just to the team name itself. Mm-hmm. Without having, like, it doesn't even matter whether they have a strong player at this point in time, because just for you pay a certain amount just for the team brand and the community. People might, like, Team Liquid is another value. Like, players get so much more following just because they're on Team Liquid. So there is an inherent value to the team brand itself, where players then skyrocket in popularity. I mean, Taker has been doing okay on Slayers for the longest time. Yet when he joined Team Liquid is when he exploded. Obviously, his performance also went up, like he took it up a notch as well. But
okay, how do you? Okay, that brings up a good point, Chris. Yeah. How do you value Tasia right now?
He's good. He's not as good as Violet, for example.
Okay,
he wins.
That's good.
So I would still value a Violet higher than Tasia. Tasia brings in the win. I mean, look at IPTL. He all kills IM once and then goes, like, takes another 3 maps of them, almost carrying Team Liquid single-handedly to win a team league.
I mean, I think that just sums it up right there. I mean, you're talking about one of the best players in the world right now, who's, like, you know, he's won.
There's an even more drastic example. Look at FXO Gumiho.
Okay.
He all killed Slayers in the GSTL, which is, I believe, a first. All killing a team and winning the most competitive StarCraft 2 league in the world, single-handedly, and yet no one really cares.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, and then as a sponsor, that, like, on FXO, it's still Lenok that I value higher than Gumiho, even though Gumiho might be, like, pulling off stunts like that. Obviously, for the fans, GSTL fans weren't really exciting. They hoped to see more matches, but pulling off something like that, if a player with a larger fan base, because he engages his fan base and whatnot, pulls that off, it's going to be so much bigger and so much more valuable for everyone involved.
So I mean, when you say, like, okay, like, just going back, I mean, of course, I'm familiar with our team because we're an example of this, and we've kind of been growing up with Razer, right? Along the way, I mean, obviously, we had Naniwa, right, which was a very, very high-profile player, but not somebody who liked to do not somebody who liked to do a bunch of sponsor stuff. So he built the team brand, right? But I don't think that really delivered the kind of return that you're looking for.
Right.
So
we actually
now,
mentioned Naniwa earlier.
So now, I mean, now we're kind of in this position right now where we basically need to turn the wheel on the marketing side really, really, really well. How long do you think we're going to need to turn that wheel, let's say with our current roster, and getting everybody doing the right behaviors before we're worth more? Like, is that like a 6-month thing that you need to see consistency, or is that like you need to see consistency for a year, or is that something it's
not about a time frame. You can do these things within a week for all I know. If you just do it right. So it depends on the learning curve of the team and how well they adapt to that.
Sure.
Right now with the Quantic roster, I think it's more an issue of getting the traction. Like you might, so that's a thing that I drive home with my team internally as well. A lot of times is having content is one thing. Getting content, but content that nobody sees is absolutely worthless.
Worthless, right? Exactly.
If I get a couple of hundred viewers on my newest CLG guide for one of the heroes in LOL, which initially was the case, then there was absolute waste of money, because if no one sees them, then there's no value in it. But so we opened up a partnership with MobileFi as well, and that helped us getting the eyeballs on this content that now makes this even the time spent and the money spent on these things worthwhile. So but these things can happen overnight for all I care. It's about one, having good content, whether that and B, getting the eyeballs on it.
What analytics are you using for this? Like, when you were saying that Violet's worth more than Tasia, I mean, what metric are you using? Because or what's out there right now to give you those stats? Like, I mean, are you waiting for like folks to say that they bought a Razer, like a Black Widow keyboard because of Violet? Like you see all these retweets all the time when folks buy X product because of a player, right? Is it that sort of thing, or
that helps? But the thing is, it's always somewhat inconclusive, because a lot of people might actually be buying those products but never tweet about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of that too. And a lot of people who buy the products years later, even because of Naniwa was a sponsor.
I mean, ultimately with sponsors, it's always hard to quantify it. So the next best thing we can look at is, for example, look at his Facebook page and see how many people like him. Look at his Facebook page and see whether he engages with his fans. Like having taking Mark's example of Naniwa having 17,000 followers on Twitter, about 56 tweets, if I remember that correctly. That shows that that there's not much value in that guy, or untapped. There's potential in him, but that potential is not tapped on, I guess, or tapped in on. So I always have to look at multiple factors, really, but generally social media, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube views, these kind of things. YouTube subscribers are important, but then the other thing that is hard that's just quantifying value, and the more difficult task, and that's something that maybe we on Razer's side of things we started doing more often than not, is qualifying aspect to it, which is very hard to explain or even to put down on paper. But obviously, like my start page, like whenever I start my browser, my Reddit StarCraft 2, my Reddit LOL, my Reddit Dota 2 pops up. That's the first thing I see every morning. Next thing I look at is Read More, which is a German website, but point being, they have all the match results of pretty much the major games of the last 24 hours or so. Next thing I look at is you go to Team Liquid, to Cadre, to Join Dota, to ESFI, all these sites, and just see how do people feel about players, and that's really something that is hard to put down on paper or to quantify in any way. But it's something that, because we have about overall 8 to 9 people in Razer that are working in esports in some capacity or another, we have that knowledge within our department to know what's going on and to qualify, to know what our players worth, which might not be possible to put on in numbers or put onto paper, but regardless of that, we know. We know which players are more valuable. It's a bit of a cop-out answer, I gotta admit. It's the best answer I can.
I think that summed it up. Like, you don't actually have just like definitive numbers, I guess, on it. So, but anyways, why don't we
Before we break, I want to ask my big question for the show.
Okay, go ahead.
Here's my big question. If I was going to come in here, if I was said to you, Chris, which is ironic because this is what we've done, pretty much. I mean, let's just suppose I'm going to come in and I'm going to spend $250,000 investing in esports as an industry. I'm going to build a business here, right? And that business is a team. And of course, no matter how good at the marketing I get, no matter how good the logistics, no matter how much my players are winning, I need to drive traffic to my content. I need to drive traffic to my players, and I need to be relevant.
Right.
How much of my budget should I be spending on advertising or on players that are high value, high visibility in order to get that traction? Because I don't think that anybody who enters the space gets the fact that that's required. I don't think they realize you need to spend like a lot of your budget on that.
I don't think on advertising, like, okay, a lot of these promotion activities can be free. That's just from my experience in marketing itself. If you promote yourself well, you don't need as much money to spend on these kind of things.
Sure.
Spending money on high-profile players, yes, that's important. But like building a fan base, if you have a well-spoken player that wins, that can articulate himself or herself for that matter, then you can build a fan base without spending a lot of money. That's what I mean. That's what social media is for at the end of the day, or not what it's for, but what in marketing we use it for at the end of the day. It's you have all these free marketing platforms, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, or for like I don't know, like these things are all free. Reddit even can help you to promote your stuff. So there are so many ways to do advertising for free these days that you just need to make sure that your players are
engaged. It's engagement.
That they're engaging, that they're taking care of their fans. You can get fans just because you're nice to your fans, even if you're not good. Obviously, if you can compete on a high level and then you're nice to your fans, everything else will fall in place.
Just take care of your fans. Focus on your fans as well as yourself.
Exactly.
Not just be selfish.
All right, guys. Why don't we take some questions at this point? We're running over just with the topics, but it's great discussion. So it definitely was worth it. But I know there's a lot of folks here with some questions. So why don't we? So you said Tom wants to come in here. Mark?
Yeah, Tom's ready.
Let's get Tom first. We'll get Keon in here.
You know, Jeff wants to come on too, right?
Yeah. I'll get Jeff in here too. So we'll do. Gotta fix these screen regions. So
It's Ron Swanson.
You want to introduce Tom, Mark?
Hey, Tom. You there, Tom?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, Tom. What's up?
Tom's a marketing
Hi, guys.
professional, and he comes from like the digital media space, I guess. He works for a company called Razorfish, and he actually manages the Microsoft Bing marketing account for all the marketing for Microsoft Bing. And he also runs a esports podcast called the Esports Business Podcast and a website and blog called Data Mined Out.
Hey, I like the new Bing commercials, by the way. They're cool.
Yeah, that whole campaign's been a lot of fun to work on so far.
Yeah.
Do you have a question, Tom? For
what you got, Tom?
For Chris?
I'm actually just so I started watching the show this particular episode back when you guys were talking about non-endemic sponsors, and I have a lot of my own opinions on pulling in non-endemic money, but I'm actually really curious to know, or just to hear more about what kinds of ideas you guys have that can be implemented to draw in more of that sort of content, more of that money, more of that non-endemic, I guess.
So are you saying, like, is it really just sales, or is it that we need to show those people something that we're not showing them? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, there's plenty of tactics. I mean, from content marketing all the way up to personal player brands. I'm curious as to what do you guys think would really draw in the non-endemic user? Is it player brands? Is it more money from tournaments? Is it huge, or is it larger viewership? What really attracts them?
It's a combo
quick
of
question.
all of them.
Are you talking about non-endemic users or non-endemic sponsors?
Talking about
Because
lifestyle
just now you
brands.
said non-endemic users.
Lifestyle
Oh,
brands.
sorry,
Lifestyle
sponsors
brands.
specifically.
Yeah.
Lifestyle sponsors. Right.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I can talk from my perspective. So, for example, one thing that we just started working on is working with Billabo, which might be some like a company that really doesn't have anything to do with gaming at this point in time, but they're a lifestyle apparel brand, and getting them, like what we're doing is we're bringing our brand to life. So at the same time, we're trying to get them involved in esports. So showing them, hey, this is basically your target group that you're looking at, and these guys have a certain amount of buying power as well, and they might just be excited about your brand and your products. And obviously, you start off with so one thing that might scare off a lot of non-endemic sponsors are the amounts that teams are asking for. Teams a lot of times go in and say, hey, this is I don't know, let's say Coca-Cola, they have shitloads of money, let's ask for $100,000 a year or so. The problem with that is Coca-Cola doesn't know whether they can make money back on this. They have no tested and true models of that or anything like that. So the first thing that people should be doing is do a free sponsoring for all I care.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. We
You need to educate the new sponsors.
Yes.
You need to
The only
educate them and
companies
bring them
getting paid
in,
for no
welcome them
money
in.
are lifestyle companies. That's the only ones we'll deal with for no money is the ones that are coming from the outside because they just don't know. And the biggest thing they're concerned about is the risk. You just have to show them that they're safe here.
Right. So for a sponsoring manager in a non-endemic company, if he, like, let's say even if he is sold on esports, he has to pitch it to his boss and saying, hey, I want to do this. And the boss might just go like, are you crazy? Like there's no way that he can prove that this is going to work. It's a huge risk. So keeping the risk low just to show that there's value in it. Then I know that there's value in it, and I know there can be value provided for these sponsors, but they are unwilling to take the risk. So why don't you, as a team, go out and say, okay, for the first 3 months, we're going to do this. We're just going to promote you. We're going to show you how well it pays off. And if you like what we're doing, then we talk about cash sponsorship or financial investment in that. And you only reward us if we can deliver this, this, and this. That's a thing where as a sponsor, like the decision maker for a non-endemic sponsors, he will go like, okay, there's no risk for me involved. I get this, and then I can justify what we just spent, or I don't, and then I didn't lose anything either. So,
but understand that's like two businesses, right? That's just not being a team. That's also being a marketing company. You got to invest and build those capabilities, both of them, simultaneously. Yes. And if you can't do that, then you really can't command dollars in the space. That's the bottom line.
Right, but okay, so in order to be a professional team in any sport, you have to have that marketability and that marketing, that knowledge. Any team that only has like their 5 players and that's about it, like in the team game, or they're a couple of players and no one to take care of the marketing and PR side of things, eventually it's going to only stay as they are, or they're going to be bought up by a team that has these capabilities. It's
exactly.
Either or.
We've done that a few times actually. So yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
So while we're talking about teams, one thing that I have found to be a particularly interesting thing that happens again and again is every time you have some kind of fiasco or bungle, like big PR bungle,
right.
in the scene, there's all this uproar over who's emailing the sponsors, why is like punishable action, or why is punishment being carried out on these players, because they're just trying to have fun or whatever. But the question that I have that's been actually bugging me for a long time is, do you think that it's really people emailing the sponsors, or do you think the sponsors are just paying attention to their investment, and then when they see that the brand is not going a way that represents them well, they turn it around and say, you guys need to change this, you need to manage your brand, you need to manage your players, and then have that turn around? Or do you think that it's actually community feedback? Because I find it hard to believe, I mean, when you look at how much feedback, Kobe Bryant sponsors probably get over the crazy stuff that he does, it doesn't really seem to bother them all that much. I imagine sponsors get hundreds of emails a day, but you can't
so
argue with
there's,
Oh.
I mean, sometimes the feedback is enough to make a move. Like Nike saying goodbye to Tiger Woods, for example, after he pulled off his stunts with his 14 affairs. But so sometimes community feedback, which is essentially the same there, can get a sponsor to pull a sponsorship. Generally, you have to also look at different sponsors. Like for us, we pretty much know what's going on. Like, I get these emails 1 or 2 days after the incidents happen, and I'm like, yeah, I already knew about this, and we already have a plan as to what to do. I primarily look at the team to take the right course of action. Let's say a player goes off and does racial slurs on stream or anything like that. That's something that we can't have, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then it's upon the team to make the right call, or even talk to their sponsors and say, hey, this is what happened. We can now either let him go, or we can
true
offer a
story. It
formal
was
apology.
Destiny that left. Destiny left the team because of his concern for the
Yes.
team.
Yeah, he did.
Hmm
I remember.
So yeah, I mean, obviously, I was talking about that.
No, but people in the chat were
Named
asking.
it.
Yeah.
People in the chat were asking.
Oh, okay. Yeah, fair enough. So there are examples where, while it might not be a big issue to some people, or like even then after Destiny left, we got a lot of emails saying, hey, there were just a couple of people that were very vocal about it, and Destiny shouldn't leave because we still love him. So, and then they think, like, you guys probably might not know that, but Destiny has a lot of fans. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of knew that. So, and then they say, oh, why didn't you keep him around? He still has a lot of fans. And I know Destiny has a lot of fans. The problem is that ultimately, as a company, I can't associate, because this, even if it's a very minor group that's offended by it, it's racial slurs, so we can't have ourselves associated with that. Whether I think Destiny is a racist or not is an entirely different topic. I don't think he is, but that's not the point at that point. Like at that point in time, the only thing I have to see is that there are people that are offended by our association, and rightfully so.
But even if it's like a very small minority, I mean,
If
you know,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If it's a
Okay.
legit reason,
Mhm.
I have to disengage from that person. If it's something where people, like, if he, like, I don't know, if he calls his opponent an asshole or a noob or something like that, I don't care. People do that. We gamers, like, you can curse as much as you want, but there are a couple of things that people absolutely have to stay away from, and racist slurs is one of them. Because
Some gamer lingo too, like the word rape and stuff like that, has been a real hot topic in the FPS community. There's just some things when it's offensive, pretty much, right, Chris?
it depends on the context, and
Wow,
but yeah,
okay.
it's a bit gray area. Yeah, rape is borderline offensive, and if it gets blown up, it might cause us to withdraw sponsorships as well. But the usual cuss words that a lot of people use don't mean anything, and as this guy in the chat just said, context is everything. Like, you saw Stefano calling Hasuop a Nazi on Twitter, which is a running joke between them, and no one got really offended. Like, Hasuop's answer, yeah, you better hide your bomb when you go on a plane, right? When no one gets offended by it, because like people take note of it, and it's not ideal, definitely, but it's not the end of the world.
I think it's, from my perspective, it's like if people have a choice, then it's okay. Like damn Republicans, if people choose to be a Republican, you know, you're an asshole. I mean, theoretically, you chose to be an asshole. But like, you're
Well, you
Mexican.
don't choose to be a German.
You don't choose to be a German. You don't choose to be a rape victim. You don't choose to be black.
So if you go with that logic, Stefano calling Hasuop a Nazi probably wouldn't have been the right thing. But at the end of the day, no one got offended by it. And
Well, that was Nazi's not German though. I mean, there's a lot of people. Only the Nazi Party was only
Yeah,
like
but
5% of the country.
he
Right?
based it on Hasuop's Jeff.
Like, there's, I mean, come on, that's a lot of
Now
insensitivity
here's an
there. Come
interesting
on.
question
Jeez.
with this whole story that you just brought up. Okay, you're looking at that and saying, we've looked at that and said, oh, that was just nothing, whatever. What if 20 people had emailed you extremely irate about it, whether they understood the context or not, or if they did understand the context of it, but still were very upset at the use of the word Nazi, at the whole situation?
They said that,
Because outside of our industry, had that popped up on Twitter, had
Could have
a
been the
politician
sites like
said,
Kavizel and
it would have been
Glucose did.
it would have been
Yeah.
horrible. But
Been a bad
even
day.
so, if the context was understood and it still offended someone, I'm just curious, how would Razer look at that? I know every company is going to look at it differently, but how would Razer have looked at that had 20 or 30 or 40 people emailed you just very upset?
Good question. That's a good question.
So the first thing I would look at, okay, so let's say it's in a generally okay context, but some people got offended by it, right? That's the premise. I would see that the player can offer an apology for his behavior. Okay, so the difference between maybe Stefano and Destiny in this case is that Stefano did that once. Destiny does it multiple times or consistently. If it's a one slip-up, then offering a public apology and can work. A second time is probably a zero tolerance kind of thing where you say, okay, now it's too much and we have to say goodbye to that player or disassociate ourselves from that player. So at the end of the day, these 20 people can be enough. If it's a first-time offense, I would say that we'll try to find a way around it, see that the player apologizes for it, realize that he made a mistake, and is genuine in his apology. And if it happens the second time, that's it. Even if it's just 20 people.
Yeah, I understand, and I was just asking because I think that's an important question to ask, for people to understand that, and your answer is very well said. I can't remember what I was seriously just going to ask you a question in regards to that. Damn it! Sorry, lost my train of thought.
Stop reading chat, John. Jeez.
I was reading the chat. That's
Chat
actually
monkey.
where the question came from, and then I totally just lost it.
So maybe on that topic, we had recently only, maybe that we were a bit late to the game, but recently about I'm going to say 4 or 5 months ago, added in a clause in all our contracts.
That's what I was going to ask.
Okay, so
Yeah, about a code of conduct or something.
to prevent that, which basically outlines that this type of any type of offensive language, racial slurs, or anything like that is absolutely prohibited and can lead to termination of the contract immediately, and even be fined. Depending on the cash value of the sponsorship, the team can be fined based off that.
Perfect.
All right, Tom. Thanks for coming on, buddy. We're gonna try to get Jeff on here.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Cheers.
All right, take it easy.
All right, let's get Jeff on here, and then we'll try to get Kihun in here. The bows. What's up, Jeff? Holy shit!
yo,
That's
yo,
like a
what's up,
wind
what's up?
tunnel, man.
Are you?
All right, there we go.
Hey, what's up, man?
Welcome to my live stream.
Exactly.
What's up, guys?
So you got a
Oh.
question for Chris Mitchell here?
Do I have a question? No, I don't really.
Oh, man.
I've just been sort of listening. Actually, when you guys were talking about, Stefano saying the Nazi thing and how sort of Chris was saying that it would sort of be overlooked since he's only done it once, opposed to someone like Destiny that would throw around that sort of stuff on a regular basis. I personally feel that if it's somebody like Stefano, somebody so big and prominent in esports, that I personally feel like it would be overlooked even if it was done a couple of times, opposed to somebody, say, even like myself, that necessarily could get a sponsorship, but also could have it taken away for doing things like that. But I feel like some guys like Stefano may be able to sort of,
Get
pull
away
some
with
strings, get away with it.
Jeff, I
Um,
agree with you. I was when that first happened, I was waiting for the gauntlet to drop. I was waiting for it to drop, and I thought it would, and then I thought to myself, it ain't gonna drop. Not anyone in this community is gonna say word, because there's a lot of people in the StarCraft 2 community specifically that are extremely two-faced, and this was an example where I thought, that's being two-faced. It's hypocritical. Destiny does it. It's one thing, because there's a lot of haters of Destiny. But Stefano, everyone loves Stefano. He says it, whether it was out of context or not, and a lot of people didn't know the context of it. I figured that that's exactly what would happen. That people would just be like, "Oh, big deal."
Yeah,
on that topic, though, maybe just, I think he gets away with it in the community. If he was sponsored by me back then, I would have had a chat with his team manager or him directly, and would have told him that that's not okay. And if it happened a second time, I would have still let go of him.
Really?
Regardless of, yeah, I mean, he's a great player, don't get me wrong. But there's so much downside potential to that. Like, in everything you do, like, okay, in every sponsorship I look at the upside and the downside risk, right? The upside potential to the downside risk. And the downside risk is so much larger at that point in time if a player consistently does these things, because this can go into mainstream press and this can ruin an entire company. I mean, I'm drawing an extreme picture here, but it has the potential to do so. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is get some value out of this without risking our entire business at the end of the day. So
Yeah, that's the biggest part.
Yep.
You can't have that risk, man, or you just can't engage.
So, I mean, there's an inherent risk with any sponsorship because you can't control, and this is not different from any other sport, though. It always happens. But you minimize that risk, and if a player is prone to do these things, like if after a discussion with a player that he can't do certain things, and he does it again, then I have to disengage from that player, regardless of whether the community finds it offensive or not. And regardless of whether he's the best StarCraft 2 player outside of Korea, one of the players with the largest fan base in StarCraft 2, period. It's a difficult decision to make, but the only possible decision that you can make in that scenario, simply because the risk of like, I can risk much more than our eSports arm. I can risk our entire business, and that's not nothing that I could rationally do.
Mm-hmm. Nope, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
That makes sense.
All right,
I think it's Jeff. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah.
I mean, just out of curiosity, man, what fluorescent green headset is that you're wearing?
To be honest,
Tell us a little bit
Oh,
about
come on,
it.
it's the
Tell us a
Orca.
little bit
It's
about
the
it.
it's
Orca.
the Oracle or whatever. What is it?
Orca.
The Orca? I don't know. Mark gave it to me. It's friggin' awesome though. But it's gonna be tough to use with my green screen that I have. So I'm waiting on the Razer Banshee one.
Dude, that would look so wicked if you had a fluorescent green screen and you looked like you had like no headset on, just the Razer logos on the side of your head.
That would be pretty funny.
Wow.
Hey, Razer, man! I'm starting a video. I'm making a video with official. I want them buzz pads made, and I'm going to get 100,000 views in that video, and I'm going to have thousands of people that are going to want to pre-order that mouse pad. Are you going to make that happen or what?
If you make that happen, then I'll take it to our prior team.
There you
Okay.
go.
There you go, man. That's tacit agreement.
We
right
make
there.
deals on climbing the
Well,
ladder
we
too,
do.
guys.
All right.
All right, Jeff. Thanks, man.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Last caller. One last caller, and then we'll call it night. Kurt. Oh, where are you? Oops. Kurt's our regular. Oh shoot! I just accidentally freaking
Hung up on Kurt. That's okay. He said enough.
Hello.
Kurt, what's up?
Oh boy.
What's up, guys?
Oh boy.
Look
So
at
talk to
John.
us. What
John's
do you
like,
got?
all
What do
right,
you got?
all right, I'm going to be here for 30 more minutes.
All right, what do you got?
A few things. Number one, I do want to give another shout out to the Data Mined Out guy, Tom. I really like his podcast, and if you like this show, especially like that.
Yes.
So you do need to go check that out. It's really awesome stuff. Yeah, so Chris, I have two questions. My first one is I've been around the community for a little while. I understand just how long Razer has been supporting esports. I mean, they supported one of the very first CPLs ever, if I remember right. The what was it? The
2003.
yeah.
I think.
It's been a long time.
You can
It's been a
still
long
go to that website and hook up your Winamp.
yeah, it's pretty amazing. I think it was like the Speakeasy CPL or something like that. Anyway, but I want to set a little context here, and I'm just curious about. It seemed like Razer had a shift of focus when it came to sponsorships. In between, I would say 2010 to 2000, to currently, maybe 2009, 2008 to currently,
Okay.
where Razer had this, they weren't really sponsoring very many North American teams at all, whether they be up-and-coming teams, even whether they be bigger teams. They were more pointed towards the EU scene. You're sponsoring a lot of teams over there, I think MIM at the time, and a bunch of other ones anyway.
Right.
I'm just curious as to why that shift happened. It's a good thing, I think, but I'm just curious as to why you think that shift happened to where now I see you sponsoring a lot of North American teams, Legion and Quanic and all these, in all the smaller teams as well as
Right.
the big teams.
Okay, there's two factors that play into that. One thing, esports in the US has been dead for a long time until the arrival of StarCraft 2 and League of Legends. Some might blame CGS for that, but basically after CGS fell apart, esports has been pretty much very, very dead in North America. So the outside of there weren't a lot of major competitions in PC anyway. Okay, I'm talking about PC right now because console back then hasn't been a segment for us. So there has been console esports through MLG and all that kind of stuff, but outside of that, there weren't a lot of esports things going on. Then StarCraft 2 happened, and it started picking up. Then League of Legends, and now you have these two titles, and maybe Dota 2 recently as well. And we'll see how CS:GO goes. But generally, these games have brought back esports into the mainstream. So that's one factor that plays into that, I would say. The other thing is that generally we had a change of strategy generally, or not change of strategy, but I personally took over esports about 1.5 years back or so, and I think that's where the shift kind of happened, where we started going from waiting for teams to apply with us. Back then, most of the teams that we were sponsoring had applied with Razer, and we sponsored them. We now moved to a way of approaching